What's up guys, Balmont here. So today marks the amazing but unforgivingly overlooked The Evil Within's 7th anniversary. The brainchild of Shinji Mikami, the man responsible for many titles many of us absolutely love. The Evil Within is full of symbolism, has an intricate story, hidden and subtle details, a non-linear unveiling of events, and a very robust gameplay. And I'll tell you all about it. And all that I ask in return is that you hit that like button and subscribe. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great joy that I bring you The Evil Within 7th Anniversary Special. With several horror smash hits such as Resident Evil 1 through 4, Code Veronica, Dino Crisis, and many more remarkable titles under his belt, in 2010 Shinji Mikami decided to start his own company, Tango Gameworks. And its very first project would be none other than The Evil Within itself. Originally called Fray, Mikami had a very hands-on approach in this title to ensure it would be a pure survival horror game. And I'm gonna tell you right now, he drove this one out of the park. As you learn pretty early into the game, resources are very limited, from medkits to syringes, ammunitions and grenades. Even when upgrading their respective carrying capacities to the maximum, you'll never have enough to start feeling comfortable. Oh no. And in order to ensure you have a chance of both surviving when things go south, because believe me, they will, and saving what little ammo you can, another key element was added: stealth. And the stealth mechanics have been beautifully implemented into the game. Let's discuss its key aspects. First up, stealth kills. Approach most enemies from behind, and our dear Sebastian will end them without firing a single shot. Simple and effective, as it should be. And the same goes for Kidman, with the exception that she'll need access to do so. You will spend the vast majority of your time with our beautiful blue-eyed cop giving enemies the slip though. And I'm also gonna tell you right now that Kidman is one of my favorite horror characters ever, but we'll get to her later on. And the second and most impressive aspect of the stealth mechanics in The Evil Within is the fact that you can lose any tail you may have without having to resort to ninja bombs, black magic, or stealth camouflage. In real life, losing sight of someone you're chasing is much easier than it was in games back then, where most of the times enemies would simply beeline to your location once you were spotted. But if you make one or two turns with enough space between you and your pursuer, and if you're smart, the chase quickly becomes a search. If you used to play on the street with your friends as a kid, then you remember this. And this concept is very well implemented here, even at higher difficulties. Enemies have no magic radar or super Saiyajin sense, and this has several positive implications in your gameplay possibilities. For example, if you don't have a bottle to throw but you know the lay of the land, you can very well be seen on purpose at a very specific corner, let an enemy chase you, give him the slip and head towards your goal, all while thinking, sucker. The seamless integration between the extremely well-made stealth system and the functional combat gives the player extremely flexible possibilities. The very same scenario can shift back and forth between stealth, combat and evasion very quickly. You would be amazed at how many times I escaped certain death with nothing but quick thinking and knowing the lay of the land. With very few exceptions, which were royal fuck-ups on my part, no situation was ever truly lost. And still on the gameplay department, you have all the classic weapons you'd expect: the revolver, the shotgun, the sniper rifle, and hand grenades. And yes, there's also one very welcome addition, which would become both the signature weapon of the series and one of my personal favorite weapons of all time: the Agony crossbow. This bad boy works a little differently from the rest of your arsenal. The Agony crossbow has several types of bolts for you to use, like the standard harpoon bolt, the explosive bolt, and one of my favorites, the flashbang bolt. Seriously, remember this little dude over here, it'll save your life more than once. Just make sure to upgrade its stun time to at least 10 seconds, alright? And the way you go about procuring ammunition for the Agony crossbow is a little different. Although you will find some bolts here and there through the game, most of the time you'll be crafting your own ammunition with universal parts you can find at set locations and parts gathered from disarmed traps. This also adds another layer of flexibility to the game. You see, since you can craft any bolt at any given time, you can focus all of your parts on specific bolts whenever the situation calls for them. A little word of advice though, always keep at least one flash and one lightning bolts at the ready. Another thing that's also very worth mentioning is the inventory wheel. It's quick, precise, and allows you to instantly remap your shortcuts. One button tap, that's it. There's no, are you sure? I don't know. Have you confirmed this with your friends? No, if you're quick, we're talking about a fraction of a second. So when you mix all the Evil Within has to offer in terms of pure gameplay, the balance achieved between helplessness and survival options is, to me, almost perfect. So much that after I'm done with this video, I'll be playing this game again not only for its story but also for its gameplay. And speaking about gameplay, let's talk combat. Good gameplay mechanics mean nothing if you're met with artificial difficulty in the form of endless enemy waves or enemy setups that are just there to make you die over and over and over again. The Evil Within excels at offering balance between challenging areas and breathing room. There were very little times where I thought this is cheap whenever facing bigger groups, and there's another factor responsible for this: the excellent map design. With so many gameplay options at your disposal, you need a good playing field to exercise them all, and the Evil Within delivers every single time. Be it in a narrow corridor or an open area like a graveyard, both enemy placement and map design always make sure that you have chances of surviving. This also applies to bosses. Now granted, the game only has a handful of them, but the attention to the play area is still the same. And there's another thing that I think speaks volumes for the quality level we got with Evil Within's gameplay. I don't know if you noticed this, hopefully you didn't, because that would mean you're entertained by my video, but I've spent the first 8 minutes of this video talking about nothing but mechanics. And you can trust me on this one, I'm not stalling for time. Most people, they have trouble making big videos, I have trouble making small ones. And during one of the revisions of my script, I actually considered to leave the gameplay factor out of this video so I could just focus on the story because it's so good. But if I did that, I'd be leaving out some of the most important aspects that make the Evil Within a very pleasant experience, so, I had to do them both. So now let's talk characters and story. The main course of the day and the part I was dying to get to. If we think about it, the number of IPs that we've played in our lives whose characters and stories actually managed to make an impression on us will be far smaller than the IPs we immediately forget everything about after beating them. Fuck man, there's even some games whose story and characters we forget while we're playing. You reach the final boss and ask yourself, who the fuck was this again? Oh yeah, you were, well anyway, die. And this goes double, some would say triple, for horror games. Most horror games we have, especially nowadays, are little more than a bunch of jump scares stitched together with very little to no substance behind them. I mean, sure, a quick snack can be good, but junk food can only get you so far. Eventually, your body's gonna need a more complete meal. So, with its intricate and well-built story, likable characters, many symbolisms, and non-linear information unveiling, the Evil Within has one of the best storytellings I've ever seen in a video game. As in any noteworthy horror story, things are never laid out on a silver platter for the player to simply absorb. A good horror story presents its elements in well-dosed drops. It exposes enough to keep you interested in thinking, but never too much to give it all away at once. In the horror genre, the questions are just as important as the answers themselves, and with a non-linear unfolding of events and subtle hints which are referred to at a later point in a way that it makes you realize what was going on without ever being condescending or disrespectful to the player's intelligence, you're more than likely to not make certain connections the first time you play it. To better elucidate this, let's take a look at the very opening of the game, before Sebastian makes his grand escape from the mental hospital. If you pay attention, you notice that some of the victims were seated. They were caught off guard. Having only one victim in this position would be logical, as the others would be instantly alarmed. However, more than one person was caught in this exact same manner, and they were somewhat far from one another. Other victims were dragged violently just as they were murdered. There are even clusters of dead bodies. Once you piece all of those observations together, it becomes pretty clear that this assault was done very quickly and with inhuman force. But we're not done yet. Once Sebastian reaches the security room, he finds Dr. Marcelo Jimenez in a near catatonic state. And here's what he has to say.
Can't be real. Impossible. Ruvik is...
At Joseph Oda's recommendation, Sebastian takes a look at the security records. only to find a man of pale complexion and white rags demolish 3 armed guards with absolutely zero effort. As a matter of fact, it's clear that he derives some twisted and sadistic pleasure from it. So from the dead body placement alone, we immediately knew what type of entity had done this. And remember how I told you that in The Evil Within things aren't unveiled in a linear fashion? Well, before I address that, a small spoiler alert. In order to elucidate the brilliance in the non-linear unveiling of The Evil Within's intricate story and events, and how everything's weaved together even in minute details, in this next part I'll make a deeper analysis of a lot we see in the game's first 5 minutes using elements you'll discover later in the game. Now of course I won't spoil the ending or anything like that, but if you don't feel like chancing it, then skip to the time code that's being displayed on screen right now. Going once, going twice. Let's go. As you make progress, you eventually discover the existence of a device called STEM. To put it simply, think of it as a more volatile version of the Matrix. It initially required users to be directly connected to its interface, but its next version operated wirelessly. And in another file, you learn that the STEM's remote control was activated via an extremely high-pitched noise. Now let's rewind to the game's very first scene where Kidman, Joseph, and Sebastian are in the vehicle. Pay close attention to this.
184, be advised. Some problem with Jimenez on the Beacon Memorial.
Is there any... God damn.
Right there. It was at this precise moment that Sebastian and Joseph were initially pulled into the STEM. And yes, I said initially. And also, if you pay attention, all but Junior Detective Julie Kidman are affected by this. Strange, huh? I'll simply say that once you play both of her excellent DLCs, you understand why. And also, in another document, you find out that Dr. Jimenez was desperate to show his worth to someone. And once you gain enough insight into what actually went on prior to Sebastian even setting foot inside the mental hospital, Dr. Jimenez's apparently disjointed sentences will have an entirely different weight and meaning. He's not faking this. And I literally just discussed the first 5 minutes of what you get to see in the game's story. This style and level of narrative both permeate the game until its very ending. There's no peaks and valleys here as you'd expect to find in most horror stories. No sir, The Evil Within also presents some heavy symbolism. Many enemy designs derive from Ruvik's consciousness and emotion. At a certain point in the game, you come across a residual memory of a very angry Ruvik, where he says, "That cockroach, that psychopath, feeding off my work. I'll have to figure out how he got the combination to my safe." He's referring to Dr. Jimenez and how he tried making a name for himself using Ruvik's work. And all of that anger and desire to protect his secrets culminate in a monstrosity called the Keeper, who you'll also get to play in the game's third and final DLC. And this opponent's sheer strength and violence represent the viciousness with which Ruvik protected all of his twisted secrets about his experiments. We could also mention a very specific part of Kidman's DLC. Without spoiling its actors and context, in order to be rid of the organization manipulating her, she must shine a light into all of the lies and indoctrination she's been subjected to, so she can finally see the truth and find the strength to free herself. And once again, this high level of writing permeates the entire game. There's always something to look forward to. And speaking of looking forward to, let's talk map aesthetics. As the player navigates all of the madness, he'll oftentimes come across locations that, stem from the subconscious of other people. Ruvik being the most dominant power at play, of course. So, on top of the great storytelling, the scenery itself is also an active part of the narrative. And it's also pretty clear that Mikami and his team handled the map progression with a lot of attention. You see, with such a diverse set of places for you to visit, you'll never feel bored, and no narrative can be conducted without actors. So let's get right to the cast. You're put into the shoes of Sebastian Castellanos, a no BS veteran detective. Throughout the game, you find pieces of his own diaries, showing Sebastian's influence and consciousness within the STEM. You get a pretty good grasp and complimentary info on his life. While I usually don't appreciate this type of thing for a character build-up, everything he does and says is in line with his backstory. And even if we never got to know anything besides what we see, his design, demeanor, and personality all immediately tell us who he is. And here's a little side note. In some of his diaries, you'll find certain entries that are directly linked to what will later happen in The Evil Within 2. If The Evil Within 1 is still fresh on your mind by the time you play the second title, there will be many times where you go, oh, I remember reading about this. And as another side note, I really hope this video does very well because I'm dying to bring you guys the second game. So if you want to see more Evil Within featured in this channel, then make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Let's you and I make this happen together for Sebastian. But Sebastian's not all there is to keep you interested. We also have other very strong characters, like the ever-diligent Detective Joseph Oda, who Sebastian has deep trust in, and who I actually grew fond of as the story unveiled itself. Or Dr. Anthony Jimenez, who, as we played both the main game and Kidman's 2 DLCs, we learned that even though he was an egotistical asshole, also cared for Ruvik and would be conflicted about his own choices during several occasions. And then of course, there's Ruvik. This is one weird motherfucker. I won't spoil his reasons for doing everything he did, but what's really interesting about him is that while he's absolutely unapologetic for what he does and intends to do, he's certainly no slasher movie villain. You have some exchanges with him and even find records and residual memories where you witness the construction of his whole persona in well-measured increments. Kidman's DLCs also have some very interesting exchanges with the man. I know, this is probably the third time I mentioned Kidman's DLC, so let's get to it. Kidman is absent throughout most of the main campaign, and she'll show up on some very strange or apparently convenient situations, only to vanish shortly after. After you beat the main game, you will be left with a very distinct feeling of Kidman, you son of a bitch. However, once you play her 2 DLCs, The Assignment and The Consequence, not only you see this woman under a very different light, but also understand many things as they actually happen, and not as Sebastian saw and interpreted them. For example, there's this one instance where she apparently attacks Sebastian. However, once you see that very same scene but from Kidman's perspective, you'll understand who she was really attacking. And it was never our dear Sebastian. Throughout both of her DLCs, which combined last roughly 7 hours, you gain a lot of insight into the people behind her, further knowledge about Ruvik, Jimenez, and even Sebastian and Joseph. And all of this causes a very authentic transformation within her. She quickly begins regretting the unfolding of certain key events, dramatically changing her perspective and personal intentions. I'm not joking when I say that her DLC content was some of the most well-written and satisfying piece of extra material I've ever played. And the best part, as in the old days, is that nothing of what we get to see here was cut content from the main story. Everything we witness in Sebastian's campaign, we see, learn, and understand through his eyes. Playing Kidman's campaign adds further understanding about the things you've already been presented in the main campaign, while offering a deeper insight into her own character and the things Sebastian himself was never aware of or never came into contact with. Now, let me tell you something. I played The Evil Within 2 before beating Kidman's DLC, so throughout quite a few hours of the game I kept thinking, this bitch is setting me up for something, I know it. Eventually, you do realize that she's on your side doing everything in her power to help. However, had I played Kidman's DLC from the first game before, I'd have trusted her from the start. And now, for the usual final verdict. With a highly elaborate story that's never pedantic or condescending, heavy symbolism, many memorable moments, likable characters, robust gameplay, and non-linear unveiling of events, The Evil Within takes the crown as my favorite horror game of all time. Its horror comes from fully capturing the player's senses through a nearly spotless execution, generating tension, fear, and curiosity in just the right amount, never over or undershooting its target. And this creates an experience that's never tiring or boring. So in the end, The Evil Within earns a solid 9.5 out of 10 and a seat in the grand hall of memorable horror titles. So I wish this amazing franchise a happy 7th anniversary. And hey, since 7's the lucky number, maybe we'll hear news about a future game in the series. Who knows? I'd certainly love to be in the shoes of Sebastian and Kidman again. Let me know in the comments if you'd also like for another game. This video took a lot of work, but the 50 or so hours I invested in it were worth every second. Hope you guys had a great time, remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Valmont out.